Salvete omnes. This is exercise C of chapters 46 and 47. We are to translate these English sentences into Latin. Parse at your leisure. That is, when you get stuck, parse it out. So prima, sententia prima. I say that I myself have seen yon ancient building with my own eyes. Not just some other my eyes, my own eyes. So I say, what do I say? So this is our main verb, I say. The subject is I, first person singular, say, present tense, indicative, and active. Dico, dicere, dixi, dictus. So it's dico, I say. That. Now, what do I say? What am I saying? When I'm asking, what am I saying, or what is that, the answer is going to be a noun. What do I say? This noun. This long clause here is like one big noun. That's the direct object of this verb I say. This is an indirect statement. It's a whole statement. It's acting like a noun. It's a noun clause, a substantive clause. There is no word in Latin that indicates that, like it does here in indirect statement. Instead, we're just going to put the subject of the indirect statement in the accusative case. That will be I. And then the verb in the indirect statement will be an infinitive, will be have seen. The tense of the infinitive will come from the relationship, the temporal relationship between this infinitive and the main introductory verb. If the actions are contemporaneous, then the infinitive will be in the present tense. If this action is prior to the main verb, then this verb, the infinitive, will be in the perfect tense. And if this action, the infinitive, happens subsequent or after the main verb, then this infinitive will be in the future tense. So we have dico. There is no word for that here. We just put I in the accusative case. So the accusative of ego, mehi, mihi, me is me. So dico, me. I myself. Is this the emphatic intensive pronoun or is this the reflexive pronoun? So good way to figure this out is go ahead and take it out of the sentence. I say that I have seen yon ancient building with mine own eyes. It works. If you can take this out of the sentence and it still works, it still means the exact same thing, nothing changes, then you have the intensive or emphatic pronoun. It's intensifying, emphasizing the noun with which it agrees. So I, myself, whoop, it's actually more like an adjective here. So I, myself, ipse, ipsa, ipsum, must agree gender number in case with me. If this is accusative singular masculine, ipse, ipsa, ipsum must also be accusative singular masculine, and that would be ipsum. Dico me ipsum. I'm going to go ahead and add in the with mine own eyes because they belong to me. They're having to do with me, and this is how I did the action of the verb. Ablative of means, I'm going to put this next, with mine own eyes. So something like eyes, oculus, e masculine, and my, a possessive adjective, possessing or modifying the noun eyes. So meos, mea, meum. We want the ablative plural masculine, oculis meis, oculis meis. Dico me ipsum oculis meis. And then, what did I see? What have I seen? Yon ancient building. So this is going to be the direct object. The direct object, even inside an indirect statement, will still be in the accusative case, even though the subject is also an accusative case. Don't get confused. The subject usually comes first. There is a little bit of word order here. The subject usually comes first. So yon ancient building. Yon is the same as that, over there, far off yonder. That is ille, illa, illud, agrees with building. Ancient is an adjective that also agrees with building. So if the noun building, which is a thing, a noun, is aedificium aedifici neuter, and it's accusative singular neuter aedificium, then ancient, antiquus aum, must also be accusative singular and neuter, and ille, illa, illud must also be accusative singular and neuter. Now let's talk once again about that infinitive verb. It's going to be video, videre, vidi, visus, and then it needs to be in the perfect tense, because I say in the present time that I have already prior to done this thing. It's already been done. The seeing happened prior before the saying. So this must be in the perfect tense. Dico, me ipsum oculis meis, illud aedificium antiquum vidisse. Optime, secunda, sententia secunda. This work is very difficult, but we hope that our desire for glory will give us strength. So secunda, this work, well, this is that which is right here. Hic, haec, hoc is right here. It will agree with work. Work is going to be, you can either use labor, laboris masculine, or opus, operis neuter. So if you use opus, you're going to have hoc, the neuter hoc, opus. If you use labor, you're going to have hic labor. Is, simple present tense third person singular linking verb est. Hic labor est. And what is it? It is predicate nominative. It's an adjective. It is very difficult. So predicate nominative is its reason. Part of speech, it's an adjective. It is a superlative adjective of difficilis a third declension. It is a silly, bille, six. It will have a silly double L in its superlative form. Those six, silly, six are facilis, difficilis, similis, dissimilis, humilis, and gracilis. So here we have difficilis. So the superlative is difficilimus with a double L. We want difficilimus, the superlative, to agree with the subject because it's a predicate nominative with a linking verb. So if you used labor as your masculine subject, you want difficilimus. If you used opus as your neuter subject, you want difficilimum. They must agree. But one T, only one T, but now that I have your attention, it's sed, S-E-D in Latin, sed. We hope, spero, sperare, speravi, speratus, to hope. So speramus, easy, first person, plural, present, active, indicative, we hope. Now in Latin, we hope, a verb of hoping, is always followed by an indirect statement. If it's a clause. If you hope for rain, then you just hope for the direct object rain. But if you hope that it rains so much that, etc., then you're going to have a clause. That's an indirect statement. So we hope, not just for glory, but that our desire for glory will give us strength. So it's an entire clause, with a verb and everything. Indirect statement, a substantive noun clause. We hope that, the subject of which will be in the accusative. So our desire is the subject of the verb will give. So our desire for glory, of glory, verb will give the direct object strength to the dative us, dative indirect object us. So our desire is going to be cupiditas, cupiditatis, feminine. If it ends in tas, tatis, it must be feminine. It is the noun form of cupidus, aum. Both cupidus and cupiditas, the adjective and the noun forms, they often take an objective genitive, a genitive to act as its object. You are desirous of something. You desire something. Desirous of glory. So this is our objective genitive. The objective genitive of gloriae, feminine, will be gloriae. Don't forget our, the possessive adjective modifying the noun desire. If desire, cupiditas, cupiditatis feminine, is going to be accusative subject of the indirect statement, singular feminine, it will be cupiditatem. The possessive adjective, noster, nostra, nostrum, must also be accusative singular feminine, and that is nostram. So, nostram, cupiditatem, gloriae. Or, I'm going to go ahead and use the word order, cupiditatem gloriae nostram. Yes. So what will our desire do? Our desire will give us. So this is a subsequent action. It's an after action to the main verb hope. Hope happens in the present. We hope right now that this will happen in the future, subsequent. So we want the future infinitive here of do, dare, dedi, datus. We want datus, make it daturus But wait, it's actually not do, dare. This is to give strength. It's just confirmo, confirmare, confirmavi, confirmatus. Be careful of that. Don't get too literal. The verb confirmo can mean to strengthen or to give strength. You don't have to literally say do, dare, plus the accusative direct object strength. You don't have to do that here. So you can stop yourself. This is going to be will strengthen us. So let's flip that around. So our desire, still the subject, for glory, that's going to be still the objective genitive, will strengthen us, will strengthen us. So confirmo, confirmare, confirmavi, confirmatus. And us is going to now be direct object of this verb confirmo. So we want the future confirmaturus make sure it agrees with the subject desire. So cupiditatem, accusative singular feminine. We want confirmaturam, am, confirmaturam. That will have the helping verb esse to make sure it's an infinitive, although most authors would just leave off the esse. And then we want the accusative direct object of nos, nostrum, nobis, nos, nobis, which is nos, to be the direct object of this verb, to strengthen, to give strength. So altogether, hic labor est difficilimus, sed speramus cupiditatem gloriae nostram, nos confirmaturam esse. Tertia, sententia tertia. As soon as he arrived in the city, he came to see his own friend who was about to depart. So as soon as he arrived in the city. Here we have a temporal clause. As soon as he arrived in the city, it tells us when the action happened, the same time as the main verb. Temporal clauses are adverb clauses because they answer the question when, and when is an adverb thing because it has to do with a verb, an action, when. As soon as is simul atque, or simul pariter, or simul aeque. Simul atque is the most popular. It will be simul ac if the next word starts with a consonant, simul atque if the next word starts with a vowel. So let's wait and see. He arrived in the city. If you arrive somewhere, that's going to be the verb pervenio, pervenire, perveni, perventus, macron over the E in the veni because it comes from venio, perveni, the second E. So as soon as he arrived, pervenio takes the in or odd plus the accusative of whither you arrive. So in the city. In plus the accusative of urbs orbis, so in urbem, or it could be ad urbem. So simul atque, because the next word starts with in or ad, both vowels start those words. Simul atque in urbem pervenit, he arrived, pervenit, as soon as he arrived in the city, he came to see his own friend who was about to depart. So he came to see his friend. Now he came is venio, venire, veni, macron over the E, ventus. So he came as perfect tense. We want venit, that macron over the E. Now you could do a couple things here. What do we have here? He came to see his friend. Why did he come? To see his friend. So this is a purpose clause, a purpose expression. You can use the fancy old adverbial purpose clause that you learned in chapter 44. Or, because this is a verb of motion, venio, you can use, that's right, I heard you in the back, the accusative supine. The accusative supine can express purpose with a verb of motion. So, venit, and then video, videre, vidi, visus. Fourth principal part, visus, make it visum. Venit, visum, and then carry on. If you want, you could also use the adverbial purpose clause, venit ut, and then sequence of tenses, came as secondary sequence because it's a past tense. He came so that he might see, so imperfect subjunctive, we want videret. Venit ut videret. Who did he come to see? His own friend. You can put amicum, the accusative of amicus e masculine. You can add the suus so the su part makes it go back to the he, the subject of he, and then the part makes it agree with friend, amicum. So suum amicum. Venit ut suum amicum, or venit visum suum amicum. And then that friend is about to depart. You could go ahead and you could draw this out into a relative clause. You could say qui erat discessurus, or qui erat excessurus. You can make this was about to depart relative clause with an active periphrastic. You can do that. Or you can make your life easier and just make this whole thing a participle. He came to see his own friend about to depart. The friend is about to depart. So just a future active participle, make it agree with friend in gender numbering case. Discessurus, make it discessurum. Excessurus, make it excessurum. To make it agree with amicum. The friend about to depart. Amicum discessurum. Amicum excessurum. Then make sure if you use the adverbial purpose clause ut, you tack on videret at the end. So something like simul atque in urbem pervenit, venit ut suum amicum discessurum videret. Remember, you could also use the accusative supine. Quarta, sententia quarta, the longest sentence of this bunch. Fearing that his men would not be able to defend the town, he sent cavalry to be a guard for the bridge. So fearing that his men would not be able to defend the town, a participial clause. Whole clause introduced by a participle, fearing. This is a present active participle, ing. Shows a contemporaneous action, an action that is happening at the same time as the main verb. So this, as he was afraid that his men would not be able to defend the town, he sent the cavalry. Happens at the same time. While he was sending the cavalry, he was afraid, and vice versa. So present active participle, you can use timeo or vereor. So timens, ens entis, timens. The participle has to agree in gender, number, and case with the subject, so nominative singular masculine, ens. Timens or verens, verens. Now, what is he afraid? He's afraid that his men would not, negative, that his men would not. Remember in a fearing clause, the positive is introduced by ne, and the negative is introduced by ut. So this is going to be ut. Timens, ut. And what is he afraid that his men, his own men, you can say sui viri, or you can just say sui. Sui, it's like saying nosri, our men. Sui, meaning his own men, his own. Timens ut sui, from suasaum. And then they would not be able to defend the town. They would not be able. So be able is possum, posse, potui. takes a complementary infinitive, defendo, defendere, defendi, defensus, and then a direct object, oppidum e neuter. So, timens ut sui defendere oppidum possent. Now, why do we want the imperfect possent? It's because the main verb of the whole sentence is past tense, perfect tense, so secondary sequence, and we want a contemporaneous action. At the same time that he sent the cavalry, he was afraid that the men at the same time would not be able to defend the town. Like, that's happening at the same time. So, imperfect subjunctive. Defendere, possent. Possent defendere. He sent cavalry to be a guard for the bridge. So he sent cavalry. This is your old friend. Mitte, mittere, missi, missus. He sent missit, one S, missit. He sent that cavalry. Plural of eques, equitus, masculine. So we have the equites, direct object accusative. Now, he sent the cavalry. Why did he do that? Why would he send the cavalry? For the purpose of them guarding the bridge, to be a guard for the bridge. Purpose clause. So, to guard the bridge. You could do, what the book wants you to do is it wants you to use a double dative here. To be for a guard for the bridge. They want the dative of guard, which is going to be praesidio, and then they want bridge, the dative reference bridge, and that's going to be ponti. And it's used with a verb of to be, which, I'm not going to, we'll use it. How about essent? Essent. Once again, the imperfect subjunctive. Misit equites praesidio ponti essent. Or equites misit ut praesidio ponti essent. You can use the adverbial kind, or you can use the adjectival kind, the relative purpose clause. Quinta, sententia quinta. He tried to persuade the consul not to deliver a speech in the Senate that day. To deliver a speech is to orationem habere, to have an oratio, an oration. That's delivering it, is to have it. So, he tried to persuade the consul. He tried to persuade. This is your main verb, he tried. You can use tempto, temptare, temptavi, temptatus, but why would you use that verb when you have the perfectly good deponent verb, conor, conari, conatus, sum? So he tried. Deponent verbs look passive, translate them as active. So we want the perfect, conatus est. Conatus est, but that looks passive. Translate it as active because it's a deponent verb. Conatus est. So verbs of trying, you try to do something, so it takes a complementary infinitive of persuadeo, persuadere, persuadi, persuasi, persuasus. So persuadere, persuadere, we want the present active infinitive, the complementary infinitive. That takes a dative. Persuadeo takes a dative. Its object is in the dative, and its reason is dated with verb. That's going to be the consul. Consul, consulis, masculine. We want the dative consuli. So something like persuadere consuli conatus est. And what did he try and persuade him not to do? He tried to persuade the consul. This is an indirect command. This is a substantive clause of purpose. This is what he tried to persuade, order, advise him. Don't do this thing. So in the real speech, when he tried to persuade the consul, he told him, don't deliver a speech in the Senate today. Don't do this thing. That's why it's called an indirect command. It's not the direct command. It's an indirect command, a substantive clause of purpose. So nay, we want ne, nay, not to have a speech. Don't do your homework that day. Don't do it. So orationem, and then we want the subjunctive of habeo, habere, habui, habitus, and we want haberet, the imperfect haberet, because we are in secondary sequence, tried. So haberet, orationem haberet. In the Senate, in plus the ablative of senatus us masculine, in senatu, and that day, on that day. That's the ablative of time when. You could say illo die, or eo die. It could be some day that we've already talked about or mentioned previously, and I'm just bringing it up again. Or it can be that day, and you know which one I'm talking about. That far off day, that important day. So altogether, something like persuadere consuli conatus est, ne illo die orationem in senatu haberet. Optime, sexta, sententia sexta. He sent a boy to find out who had led the animals from the field. Ugh, keep telling you. How did the donkey get out of the fence again? All right. 6, sexta. He sent a boy to find out. He sent, third person singular, mitta, mittere, misi, misus. So third person singular is misit, one S. We want the direct object of puer, pueri, masculine. The accusative is puerum, puerum. So puerum misit. And he sent that boy to do what? To find out. He sent a boy. Why did he send the boy? So the boy could find out. Purpose clause. Why? In order to find out. Adverbial purpose clause. You could also use an adjectival relative purpose clause. The antecedent is the boy, so it'll be introduced by qui. Or you could just say ut. To find out is cognosco, cognoscere, cognovi, cognitus. Go learn, go find out, figure out who led the animals from the field. Cognosco, get to learn. He sent a boy, puerum misit ut, or qui, and then we are in secondary sequence, so cognoscaret. Cognoscaret. Who had led the animals from the field? This immediately kicks us into an indirect question. You should always be able to pick the direct question out of the indirect question. The direct question is, who led the animals from the field? You find out who led the animals from the field. And then he sent a boy to find out who had led the animals from the field. Clauses nested inside clauses. It's amazing. So, who had led? This is our interrogative, and here's our subjunctive verb to lead. The animals are going to be the direct object in the accusative, and we're going to ablative separation from that field. So, agro, you could say campo. The direct object accusative plural animalia, from anima, animalis, neuter. Duco, ducere, duxi, ductus, to lead. And the interrogative who is quis for the singular, qui for plural. I'm going to go ahead and choose singular quis. Quis animalia ab agro, and then to lead. I'm actually going to add the ab to duco to get abduco, abducere, abduxi, abductus, to lead from. It's a little extra flavor there. So who had led? Now, which action of the three actions happened first? We have send, find out, and lead. The leading happened first. First, the animals were led from the field. Then, the guy sends the boy. The boy is then to find out why this thing had already happened. So, if we're in secondary sequence throughout, this is secondary sequence, this is a subsequent action to this verb, this is a prior action to the main verb. This has already happened. The animals have already been led from the field. We want the lead verb to be pluperfect subjunctive. So, abduxisset, abduxisset. Altogether, the sentence says something like, puerum misit qui cognosceret, quis animalia ab agro abduxisset. Ab agro abduxisset. A campo abduxisset. Optime, septima, sententia septima. I know that you are all asking whether he did it or not. And I'm not going to tell you. Septima. I know, stuff that we know is science, scientia, skio, skiere, skiwi, skitus. I know is just the present tense skio, primary sequence. I know that you are all asking. What do I know? This noun clause, this is the thing that I know. This noun clause, this substantive noun clause, indirect statement. It's a statement stated indirectly. I know that you, the subject of the indirect statement, will be in the accusative case. You are all asking, you all, y'all. That is wos, the accusative plural subject of the indirect statement. Wos, all, omnes. Skio vos omnes. You're all asking right now, as I know it. Contemporaneous actions. If this is primary sequence present tense, then this infinitive inside the indirect statement must also be present. So rogare. No, I'm sorry, rogent. No, it is rogare. I know that you are all asking. Skio vos omnes rogare. Now, what are you asking? A question. You're asking, did he do it or not? That's the direct question. This is the indirect question, whether he did it or not. Did he do it or not? Whether is utrum, and the or not is nekne inside of an indirect question. Utrum and then nekne. Whether he did it. Now, which action happened first? We have three here. We have knowing, we have asking, and we have he did it. The did happened first. First he did it, and then you guys are asking me about it, and while you guys are asking me about it, I know that this is happening. So he already did it. We want the perfect subjunctive because we're in primary sequence. This action happened prior to me knowing about it. He already did the thing. So feceret, utrum, feceret, nekne. Altogether, skio vos omnes rogare, utrum feceret, nekne. Rogare utrum feceret nekne, skio vos omnes. Octava, sententia octava. She hesitated to ask the men if they would lead her to the city. She hesitated to ask the men. So I'm going to go ahead and add an ea, ea from isea to tell us that we're dealing with a woman, a she. So ea. She hesitated to ask. So if you have dubito, dubitare, dubitavi, dubitatus plus a complementary infinitive, dubito doesn't mean to doubt, it means to hesitate. So she doubted to ask, she hesitated to ask. Dubito, dubitare, dubitavi, dubitatus. So ea dubitavit, to ask, rogo, rogare, complementary infinitive, rogare. Ea rogare dubitavit. To ask the men, rogare takes a direct object in the accusative, viros, if they would lead her to the city. Now your first inclination may be to use si, because that's if in Latin. That's how you know if. Problem, this is an indirect question, if they would lead her to the city. She hesitated to ask the men if they would lead her to the city. That's a question. Her question was, will you lead me to the city? So see, the conjunction see, the conditional if, it's never used as an interrogative. You never use see as an interrogative. The Romans never did. So this is utrum, whether. She hesitated to ask the men whether they would lead her to the city. There's just a suppressed or not. So it's a lot like sententia septima. She hesitated to ask the men. Ea rogare dubitavit viros. Utrum ad orbem. Now, her. This is the direct object, right? Direct object of this lead verb, to lead to, if they would lead her to the city. So for lead to, I'm going to use adduco, adducere, adduxi, adductus. Put that prefix ad in front of duco for a little flavor. So adducerent, We are in secondary sequence. We want the imperfect subjunctive adducerent, because the men are supposed to lead her, and that takes me back to her, the direct object. What pronoun do we want to use here? Don't use eam. Eam would mean a different her. You want to use se. She hesitated to ask the men if they would lead. It's the same her. She wants the men to lead her, the same her as the subject, to the city. This is a perfect place to put in the reflexive. The reflexive pronoun is blank, sui, sibi, say, say. We want the accusative say. So altogether, something like ea rogare viros dubitavit, utrum ad urbem se adducerent. Optime, nona, sententia nona. Let them not ask what we have given to the wounded soldiers. It might generate lots of weird questions. So let them not ask. This is a jussive subjunctive. The main verb is a subjunctive, an independent subjunctive, jussive. Let them not ask. May they not ask. So ne plus the third person plural of rogo, rogare, present subjunctive. Ne rogent. Ne rogent. And that then kicks us into an indirect question. The direct question is, what have we given to the foot soldiers? Let them not ask what we have given to the foot soldiers. Why? Oh, because that would be very bad. We don't want anyone to know that. So, ne rogent, what we have given, what thing we have given. So this is going to be the direct object, the thing that we, subject, verb, gave. We gave a thing. What did we give? Something to the dative wounded soldiers. Dative indirect object, wounded soldiers. So quid, and then we have what we have given, do dare dedi datus. Let them not ask. If we have a present subjunctive, an independent subjunctive as our main verb, we are in primary sequence. So we have already given this to the soldiers. Hopefully people don't ask about it at some point after that. So this is a prior action. A prior action. So first person plural, perfect active subjunctive of do dare dedi datus would be dederimus. Dederimus. Quid dederimus. And we gave it to some wounded foot soldiers. So wounded, we're going to say vulneratus aon. It's an adjective formed from the participle, from the fourth principal part of vulnero. And then foot soldiers is pedes peditus masculine. So the dative would be peditibus. Vulneratis peditibus. Ne rogant quid peditibus vulneratis dederimus. Because it would be bad. Demum, decima, sententia decima. The small boy asked his father what the name was of the man who had stood on the moon. His name was Steve. No, not really. So the small boy, puer parvus, he's our subject, little boy, puer parvus, he asked his father, patrem rogavit. Patrem rogavit. You don't need to add the his. It's kind of implied that it's his own father, unless he's going around asking other people's father. So what was the name of the dude on the moon? So puer parvus patrem rogavit. What was the name of the man who had stood on the moon? So that is our direct question. What was his name who had stood on the moon? Indirect question. This is we have to use an interrogative adjective here because it has to modify the name. We're asking what the name was. What was the name? What name of the man? What was the name to the man? So, quod nomen. Quod nomen. And we typically use the dative of possession with names. Like if I ask you, quid nomen est tibi? Quod nomen est tibi? Tibi, what name is to you? So, what was the name to the man? I'm going to say quod nomen viro. Quod nomen viro. Who had stood on the moon? Who had stood on the moon? So you should use a relative clause here, qui, and then in plus the ablative of luna I feminine is luna, make run over the final A, and the standing verb, who had stood on the moon. So first the dude stood on the moon, good old Neil, and then the boy looked up at his father and said, what was his name? Who had stood on the moon. Qui in luna, and then stetiset, who had stood. We want the pluperfect subjunctive because it's a prior action to a secondary sequence perfect main verb. Optime! Very well done. You are now done with chapters 46 and 47.